Appreciate that. So thank you everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Excited to have you here for the quick query online class. And it's a very powerful tool, so I'm really happy to be presenting it for you guys. And if you are familiar with Solomon 2011, this is what you're looking at here in terms of the interface and the look and feel. It's brand new for 2011. And what you can see in terms of the quick query, in terms of background for the quick query, traditionally, if you wanted to get data out of Solomon, you had to go into Crystal Reports, for example, run a report, export the report to Excel or whatever other version you want, and then format the report and get the data that you need and take out what you don't need. So what Microsoft decided to do with this version of SL 2011 is to make things more efficient for the user, to make them more productive, to make them be able to get the information they need without having to rely on IT, for example, or any kind of customization to get the data that they need. So this is one way to empower users to be able to serve themselves, do self-service and get the data that they need efficiently and effectively. So that's what the quick query is all about. If you're familiar with Excel, they have something called a direct data connection, and quick queries are kind of like that, where you actually connect directly to the database and you actually query the tables in the database. So we'll go into that in more detail, but that's kind of the gist of what the quick query tool is all about. Now you can see that the quick query in Solomon 2011 appears on the left. So I am logged in as sysadmin. One of the things to know is, just like anything else, you need to have the permissions to be able to look at quick queries. So part of the first step that you do is decide in terms of a security model who should have access to what. And just like any other screen in Solomon, it can get very granular and very detailed. So for illustration purposes, I'm just logged in as sysadmin. I can see everything, and so the module appears. It has its own little module called Quick Query. And then also in the administration section, there's a Quick Query viewer. So you might ask yourself, why is there a Quick Query viewer here and there's also a module here? What's really the difference? So right off the bat, under administration, it actually means what it says. You're administering Quick Query Viewer or Quick Queries. So this is the maintenance mode of Quick Query Viewer. They have two modes, user mode and maintenance mode. So first I'll show you the user mode, which is what this is, and then I'll show you the administration mode, which is what this is. So I'm going to click on Quick Queries, and if anybody has questions as before, just feel free to ask and we'll proceed. Try to address them as best as we can in your chat window as you were doing with Shireen. So I'm logged into this demo company. I'm in the module called Quick Query and I see administration. You can see here on the left side that there's basically it looks like almost like the modules below. These are pre-built Microsoft queries and they're organized by modules. So under administration you have these views, under financial you have these views. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of them. They've been pre-programmed by Microsoft and they're based on views in a database that Microsoft has created. Since we're going to be using that term view a lot today, let's kind of give a little bit of definition of what that means. So a view basically is a slice of different database tables that lets you see it from a certain perspective in terms of the data. So if you have, an AR table, an AP table, a GL table, if you wanted to kind of aggregate and organize them in a particular way and you're kind of savvy with some SQL programming, you can create what they call a view, which is kind of create your own table that has a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and so forth. And that's what these are. Microsoft has created views that don't just give you all the information. It gives you specific types of columns and details that they have programmed into the quick query tool. So there is accounts receivable queries, there's bank recs, there's cash manager, general ledger, payroll. Of course, if you do not have payroll implemented or you have not purchased the module, you're not going to get any data out of the query. So for example, if I want to see any one of these, if I click on general ledger, is just another quick way to get down here. I can also navigate here. So you see accounts, account summary and budgets, so forth and so on. So there's just another way to navigate. At the top, you see again company demo, quick query, financial. This is just another way to navigate through the system that Microsoft has created. And additionally, there's the search, so we can actually query within here. If we were just going to here, we just wanted to start typing a name. Let's say for general ledger, if I start typing A, accounts, so here's the query for accounts. So it's just another way to get around the system and navigate around. So we're back to the module here. So let's bring up, let's say, journal transactions. So this is my first quick query out of the box from Microsoft. And so what you see is a lot of information, a lot of columns, and these are basically columns defined by Microsoft in terms of for the view that we talked about. You see there's 3,278 rows here at the bottom, and if there's anything you don't see, let me know. There is a limit by default set to 5,000 rows that are returned. And why would that be? The 5,000 basically is for load on the server. This is a direct query to the database. So if you were to sit here all day and click on all these queries, you basically would be putting a load on the server. So I could have gotten easily maybe 300,000 records depending on how big the database is. So Microsoft limits it up to 5,000. You probably, from a practical perspective, are not really looking for 5,000 rows of information at a time. You're probably targeting a specific type of transaction or a detail that you're looking for, so this is, I think, more than plenty to have it set at 5,000. If you do need more than 5,000, it's probably going to be better to organize it, I think, as a report or some other way of grouping that you would like. So here we have the columns. You can see here that they slide to the right, and it looks pretty much almost like a table in the system. So let's say that I want to resize these columns. I can actually resize them, move them around. So just to make it easier to see, if I say that, you know, I want to get the ones that are related to, let's see, a popular account here, 4030, and I see merchandise purchases. So you see here what they call a filter based on these columns. So journal type, right? So if I click down here, I have all of these that pertain to the columns that are in my view of the quick query. So if I'm looking for a specific account, I'm going to choose account. You know, I forgot to introduce myself, by the way. I am Louis Breda, so I probably have worked on some of your upgrades before, so sorry about that little detail. So you know who is speaking to you. And let's see. So here's account. And then I'm going to just start typing 4030. So you can see that it actually starts filtering on the spot right there. And I got a lot of rows. From 3,278, it is now 209 records that have been retrieved. And I can actually just click down and I can see what what they all belong to, and each time that it was used, so forth and so on. Now let's say that I like this, and I say that I want to see this in Excel, because now that I have something that I found of what I was looking for, I'd like to now take it into Excel and manipulate it, do whatever I need to do with it. If Excel is installed on your workstation or server, depending on whatever you're using, this little button over here is going to light up. So it recognizes that it's installed, and part of the new features with SL 2011 is a tight integration with Microsoft Office products, in particular with Excel, and also with SharePoint and Microsoft Project. So Excel is one of those features that any time there's a grid that is showing details, it actually lights it up. So we go here, I click that. You can see it tells you the kind of query that it's using, the intelligence to get the data. And you give it a minute. Sometimes it opens it automatically, sometimes it minimizes it. And here is your query. So every time there's an Excel integration, it actually puts it in this nice little format for you that matches whatever the source is. Puts in the filter. You can start filtering however you want, whatever values you want to look for, just like any other Excel list. And you don't need to paste this back into the query because it is just a query, but if this were a journal transaction, it would function the same way. You could actually now make changes, take the screen, and literally select whatever you need and copy it back to the source if you were working, let's say, on a batch. So again, all these columns, they match the screen for the column names and tables on the quick query. Now let's say that you say, okay, that's good, I like this, it's grouped, it gives me everything I need, but I want to refine this a little further, right? So maybe you're looking for an account sub-account combination. So now what do? Well, there's this fancy little button here, expand. And so what it allows you to do is to provide further levels of refinement, just like in Crystal reports, when you have a template or something like that, and you're trying to say select, where the period equals this, and the account equals that, and the vendor equals this. That logic is basically part of a SQL logic, SQL being the type of database and the language that you're using to communicate with it. So here, these are filters, and so you actually have the ability to say what the combination is. So it's going to take that plus this or that, depending on what you choose. So now you can say where account is at, and if you wanted to have all the logic in here, you can start with account equals or is. So it gives you the logic for you. You do not have to be a programmer to know what to put in here. You can just pick what it is that you're looking for. So we say is 4030. That gives me the same results. I'm gonna take this one out because it's already here. And let's say that I want to say, and let's see, subaccount 001 OPS. I'm going to start typing that, 001 OPS. So it starts narrowing it down. I have 164 rows now. Let's see if I can narrow it down further. Let's see. Okay, so reference number is another one. And let's see, 27, 28, I'm just looking through. Actually, batch number. Let's look at that. So 46, 48. So let's say we just chose batch number just to make it simpler. And is, and let me choose, I guess I'll choose 0023. And it's how many zeros? Through 4 zeros. So out of 3,278 records, I narrowed it down to 200, I think 78, then 164, and now it's one record with triple selection criteria that is filtering them all out. And I have the essence of what I need, and then again, if I wanted to, I can go to Grid to Excel, and the more rows, the longer it takes to open up Excel. But here is your record again. So again, they're showing you the tight integration, the tight filtering within the database that you wanted to do. If you said, you know, I want to print this, you can actually print the screen if you wanted to, depending on what printer is set up, but that's one feature there. Now let's see. So you have the filtering done. Now let's say that you said, you know, I really like this query. This is something useful to me. I want to be able to use this whenever I want. So you actually have the ability to save your queries. So I'm going to click on the upper left corner. And here it gives me this funny name. So this view name is what Microsoft created to provide you the base view. So when you save it, does it actually change the original view? And the answer is no. You're not going to change the original view. You're just going to change what you created and save it in that regard. So it's an addition, not a modify. So let's call this Lewis Geotran. And put a description. Keep it simple. So now I have choices here, just like with Solomon and your security model that we were talking about. You actually have the ability to say who can access this view. And you can see that all users is checked off by default. So if we uncheck that, what do we get? Well, it gives us these drop downs, and these are directly tied to the system database in Solomon. So if you have groups in Solomon, you're going to recognize them here. So let's say, you know, it could be, well, everyone you don't want to use, but if you want to use demo role, whichever one you want to use, or if you said, you know what, I just want it to be for me. I really did not intend this to be for everybody. So you say user, and then you find yourself, and I created myself already. I'll just say sysadmin, and then you say OK. So let's say I exit out of here. Then you say, you know what, that's awesome, but where did it go? Like, it's not showing up here. So what Solomon does with 2011, what Microsoft does, is just like your browser, there's cookies and caching, so to speak, on your machine. So it needs to refresh what your menu looks like. So they call this like a menu view. So there's system files that are being constantly updated. So they get updated and refreshed when you either log out or when you close Solomon. Sometimes it's both. You have to do both. You have to log out and close Solomon. So let me try this one. If I say switch user, and I just simply go back and say OK, I should see something that says regenerating menu. Regenerating means I'm going to update my menu. So if I go back to quick query and I hit financial, and we scroll down, and then there's Lewis Geotran right here. So let's say we want to verify, does it actually still exist with what I entered? And there it is. And if you're thinking, well, where did my criteria go? So I can hit that down button again. And then this is just that. So again, this is the whole criteria. So it's a pretty neat little feature within Solomon, the same thing could happen if you're familiar with it already. If I had multiple companies, I could actually have quick query view screens open for multiple companies. This particular database only has one company, but you could, just like with journal transactions or anything else within Solomon 2011, you can have a bunch of these open for each company and be querying each one accordingly. You don't have to log out of the system. So just like switching companies here from this button, if I had more here. So I could just pick the other company and then open up Quick Query Viewer and proceed accordingly. Now the other question that comes up is, okay, well that's great. What if I empower my employees to create these views, and what if they start making them public, and now I have basically some accumulation of views that folks have created that I need to get rid of because now there's too many. It's kind of cluttering things up, or they're not useful. So we close this. So let's say that this was a view that we no longer need. We want it gone. So we go to here and we think, okay, well, if we click on it, and again, given permissions and rights and all that good stuff, I should be able to just hit delete. And if you notice, delete is grayed out even though I'm system administrator. So it's a little confusing because you're thinking, well, how am I supposed to get rid of this if I can't delete it? Well, it's kind of funny, but the way Microsoft wants you to do it is they want you to go to the parent, and we bring up the original guy. And interestingly enough, this is not just the title, this is a button. So you click on the title, you click on listgl-tran, and for the way that it works, for whatever reason, that's now enables delete. You cannot delete the original one out of the system, but you can delete whatever you create. So if I actually clicked on delete, be sure you want to delete. And if I have set it for all users and people were using it, it will affect everyone's access to it. But if I just say yes, and if I then, I'm done, I hit X, and you're thinking, well, it's gone, but it's still there. It goes back to the whole caching thing. A little more on the caching. Where is the caching being controlled? Just like with your browser and your settings. I don't know if you all are familiar with this little toolbox looking thing, but when you go to tools and you go to options, see, it's keeping track of your menu here, right? So if you wanted to erase everywhere that you've been, you can hit clear. If you wanted to erase what companies you've been, you can hit clear. Other navigations within up here, you can hit clear. This is keeping 15 and 10, so these are just basically just like your browser has how many days to keep history. Well, this is kind of what that's doing. So once again, to refresh the menu that we talked about, because this is basically a menu selection for you, we need to somehow tell the system and prompt it to do so. So we go here and we do switch user. We can also just click X and close out of Solomon. I'm using Windows authentication, so that's why I'm not typing a password. I'm just hitting OK. You see once again regenerating menu, and we again do quick query, financial, journal transactions, and we see that it is in fact gone. And that's the essence of those queries. Same thing for AR transactions or any other query that you're trying to get information from the system. One other thing you may have seen, let me go back to here. And this depends, this is a little bit more advanced, but it depends on your configuration and how it's set up. But you notice there's just another little button up here. So this says generate SSRS report. So let's talk about SSRS and what that actually means, since we're talking about SQL and queries. So SSRS is simply SQL Services Reporting, or SQL Server Reporting Services. So SL 2011 has the ability to turn your query into a report, uh, so that it's kind of like Crystal reports, but this is based on SQL Server, so it's more powerful. And you can actually have it be deployed out there with the rest of your system. It's a new feature. It works with Business Analyzer. If you have not heard of Business Analyzer, it's rather recently added to the product, but basically it gives you a dashboard view of your, almost like your role center of your system in terms of what's going on with it, in terms of the financials. So if I, just for illustration purposes, I've configured this image to allow this particular report or any particular generation to occur. It basically says create a report based on this view. Here's the detail, here's parameters. You don't really have to worry about it if you're not a programmer, you won't really care, but parameters basically means, you know, what I wanted to query on or start on, so forth and so on. For illustration, we're just going to hit next, and then it tells you what fields do you want in this report that you're creating. So these are taken straight out of the top here, you can see. So I hit next. It says, you know, what do you want it to be called, and I can just to distinguish, I'm going to call the report here. Oh, I probably should have done it over here. Anyway, I'll just leave that there. It says I'm going to upload it to the report server. Again, once it's been implemented in terms of SQL Server, this would all be part of your setup. So it's going through, it's generating the report files. And let me click here. So if I wanted to see them, it's prepared the report data, it's generated the report files. This is basically the nuts and bolts of the report. Just like Crystal, you have RPT reports. And it says that we've uploaded them to the server. So again, this is all part of the SQL Server configuration. It's not standard. It's something that you would ask us to do for you. We would configure SQL to generate and have a report server from which you can run reports from. So you can see, like, for example, these are some of the reports that I was playing with. And here's the journal transaction details. So it's collecting all the reports that I'm creating. And from here I should be able to run this. If you've never seen SQL reporting services, it's basically Microsoft's answer to Crystal. As you know, right now Microsoft uses both Crystal and SQL reporting services, but they're trying to give you a more powerful way to query the database. I'm not sure what that particular error means, but let me go back to this one. I know this one's mine because I used Lewis. I did not define any parameters in terms of what date and what batch and all that it's supposed to go to, but that's kind of how it would be. Is you would have all the columns from your report, and then whatever data, when it said what parameters do I want to use, I could have said vendor ID equals this or that, and it would have returned it here. But this kind of gives you an illustration of how it would look. So that way, if somebody has rights to run reports in Solomon, or without being in Solomon, they could actually run them from here, from this report server. And I may, if I have additional time, show you how Business Analyzer looks like in terms of the how it's utilizing these reports. But that's a neat little feature there. So why this is important is that it saves programming time. You don't have to start completely from scratch. It's already giving you a head start. And then if, let's say, you know, Brittenford or any particular developer is working on a custom report, they can start from that report server report rather than from scratch. So this could apply for any query within the quick query module. It doesn't really matter which one. Okay. Great. So we've covered some of the navigation within Solomon. We've covered how there's two views of it, and I'm showing you the user view. We've covered how we can have quick queries open in multiple companies at the same time. We've covered how to add filters and make them basically compound queries. We've also covered how you can export them to Excel, and then additionally to create a report dynamically on the fly with this generate SSRS reports if implemented on your SQL server. Now let's say that you like this so far, but there's a lot of maybe extraneous details here that you don't really need. So this column journal type, if I say right click, rename, I could just call it journal. Say OK. And if you said, hey, wait, I wasn't trying to do that, let me go back to rename, and I say restore, it puts it back. So let's rename it just for kicks. Hit OK. I showed you guys about the resizing. Now let's say that you're thinking, you know what, after all, I don't think I actually need the journal type. I mean, it is interesting, but I think for now I just want to see the batches. So maybe you want to start with batch number. And you notice it has this little arrow, right? So arrow is just like in Excel, you sort. So sort, sort, descending or ascending. So if you wanted to not include this in your view, you can actually just right click and you can say remove column. And the first column is your batch number. Now let's say, transaction type, again, these are the modules. What do the letters mean? Well, if you really wanted to know, you'd have to kind of be familiar with some of the naming conventions within the module. But basically, IN would be like an inventory. And if you had the rights to it, you could go to administration, and then you could go to modules maintenance. And then this tells you what they mean. So if I then scroll down, you can see they're not necessarily alphabetical, but it pretty much lists all of them there. There's IQ, and then it tells you if it's active. Active means it's within your system and it's been implemented. But that's basically where all the modules would be for you. So you don't have to memorize them per se. Now, let's say that let's say we want to remove this one also. And let's say that you want the reference number to come before the period entered. So you can actually just left click and start dragging this over. And I put it usually in the line that divides column left to column right, so I usually put it right there. And then I've actually dynamically changed the order of these columns. And again, if I want to rename this, I'll just change it to ref number. Let's go back to this. Now let's say that you're thinking, well, is this all the columns that are there? Like, what is there anything else that Microsoft provides in this view that we talked about that's been programmed by them? Let's say you wanted this for audit trail purposes. You wanted to know, well, who created these batches because, there's either a problem or some reason, maybe you're auditing or whatever the database and your financial records. So you can actually go right click, choose columns. And this is great because now within the logic of the views that Microsoft has provided, you actually get a chance to see all the columns that are available to you. So where do these come from? These actually come from the aggregation of the columns in all of the tables that we talked about. So that's the beauty of the view is this currency ID could be from column A or table A. This currency rate could be from column B. To you, it doesn't matter. As a user, you just know that it's available to you and that it is related to the batch, because that's what this journal transactions entry is showing you. So let's say that you want to know who created this. So you can say create user, which is a field. This is the create program and the create date. So let's say create user, add, and you're thinking, it would be nice to have it first, so because then I can kind of sort that way. So I'm going to do move up. And let's say I also want to know the date, and maybe put that there. And let's say there's other ones here that you like. If there's no data, it's not going to show anything. For example, employee ID. But let's say fiscal year. Let's say I wanted to do that. So fiscal year is here. And let's put that after period entered, or before period entered. Okay. So you can actually choose your columns based on what you want. You can also reset them here to what they were. I'm going to say OK. And then here it is. This is when I created it. Here's who created it. And sometimes in the system there are processes that create batches, right? So let's say a financial statement translation batch. So you're going to see funny user IDs that don't correspond to like an actual human. It's going to be more of system created. So you may see something like that and you'll be thinking, what is that? And that's kind of what I'm talking about, is just system created type of stuff. If you had a really old version of Solomon, and let's say 4 dot something or earlier, you might see fast forward user FF something in there, and that's what that would show, and that's basically a program that migrated your data over. So all that data is still held historically in the database, and so the user fields will retain that information. So it created that. I added fiscal year, and then here it is. All right. So I got everything I wanted. And this is still on the original one, and I can still export it to Excel, and I can still print this, and I can still save this. And if I wanted to, I can also add filters to this. So it's meant to be very empowering for the end user, very interactive, and giving you multiple ways to be able to get the information that you need out of the system. Now, if you said, it'd be nice to know like a little bit more about it, this is applicable. Help with any other screens, or just like any other screens in Solomon, help is help. So if I actually click on help, it actually gives you this nice little view, the introduction, queries, reference, more information probably than you need to know or want to know, and it tells you what it's doing and how it's filtering, the description. So it just kind of goes through and provides any background information that you needed. Okay. All right, so talked about the generation, talked about the creating of the columns, talked about some of the help, and basically how you can manipulate and rename some of these columns. So if you were then to say, okay, that's awesome, so what's the difference between that and the maintenance mode or developer mode instead of the user mode? It's a subtlety, but you notice here that what's missing, or not what's missing, but what's shown here is save, refresh, and all of these things. We have the rights to delete because we have assigned the user who's running the query rights to delete or add or whatever in terms of their own. But we don't see the ability here to create anything, right, in terms of our own. So that's where maintenance mode comes in. So we were here, quick query. So we go to administration, and we see quick query viewer. Coming up slowly. So this looks a lot like that other one that we were just working on. And I was playing with vendor balances yesterday. And you notice there's one new thing. There's new button here, right? So new, if we click here. So what is this actually trying to accomplish here? Well, it's saying, you know what, I am a SQL Server either developer or at least knowledgeable enough to know how to use it. And I have created a view in SQL Server that I want QuickQuery to use as my source of information. So this kind of technically looking jargon here is basically the names of the views in the database that it's using out of the box. I could have, and I could even try to show you one here, create one called Lewis's view. And so if I spent some time creating a view, which is a slice of the information that aggregates from multiple tables, I could actually show it up here and create some additional ones for the tool to use. That means that it makes it a very powerful tool, that you're not just bound to what comes out of the box, that you have the freedom to create and modify using your own logic in terms of what you want to do. So I think it might be helpful to actually show you what we mean in terms of a little bit more with views, just to kind of hone down what the term means. So I'm just bringing up SQL Server. If you have or haven't seen it before, it's just basically this is the interaction with the database here. So here are my databases. This is where these are your SharePoint databases. This is the report server. This means that I have installed SQL reporting services, which is what we talked about when we hit the little button up here that sends it to the report services that you can also use with Business Analyzer. So if I then say, you know, okay, let me go to app 51 and I go to any one of these, you see how it says views on here? So, you know, they're kind of funny names, but you can kind of see, okay, so I see why some of these would be named so funny. These are the views that have been created within Solomon, and within the program is, you know, many years old, so Microsoft has been adding additional views, but the nomenclature of these views is related to what their purpose is, basically. So cash account sub active, basically, you can kind of tell that means cash accounts that are probably have a sub account that's active. So the view itself, if you were to look at the view and you said, well, what's in that view? And you look at columns. So it's going to give you, this is where Microsoft is pulling some of this information. And these are columns and these are columns. That's what this is referring to. You know, created user we see here. You know, we talked about adding created user up here. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed a question from Susan. Can a view be created querying more than one table at a time? Yeah, so depending on how you write the view, you can have it query multiple tables with joins. And I'll actually show you what that logic looks like in a second in terms of how you're creating these views. Good question, Susan. So this is what the view looks like. So I'm just basically saying out of the ones that it can see, the ones that are available to choose from are the ones that are here that Microsoft has provided. QQ means quick query, so these are the ones that they wrote brand new for SL 2011, and then combined with the traditional pre-existing views that are part of the software. So we go here, and if let's say I'm a fancy dancy programmer and I'm creating a view, or I want to take a view that exists and I want to modify the view. So I can actually go to here, right click, script view as, create, new create query editor. This is what I call the almost the cheat way to create views. You don't have to start from scratch and figure out the logic. So this is what the logic of a view would look like. So whoever your developer is, or yourself, if you want to, you would basically type this up. I can call this cash account subactive, let's say Lewis. And it says select from this table, join with this table or this view, and give me the ones that, based on the criteria of account equals bank account, sub equals bank sub, and so forth. So this could be a select with multiple joins. Join table 1, join table 2, join table 3. And all it's doing again is picking and choosing. See how this little asterisk here? So it's saying, you know, I want to take everything. And this interface provides you all the columns that are in that table. So the cash account table has all those columns that are being shown on there. Again, cash account, that's the table you're choosing from. If you have written in Excel data connections, this may look familiar to you because you have to enter the command for it. So this is basically creating a view, and if I wanted to, and so it's going to create it on this database, and I'm just going to say execute. It says completed successfully. It doesn't show up here right away, but if I go to here and I hit refresh, and there's cash account subactive Lewis. And if I then want to see the logic behind that, it would basically be same as before. I could also do tasks, script view as, and then these might mean more to you if you know what you're trying to do. Like if you want to select into, I wouldn't really worry about any of these things. Alter means modify, create means create. So if I wanted to not create a Lewis one, I wanted to modify the active one here, the task that I would be doing is alter, and all you see is that the command is different. Instead of create view, it says alter view. So I might add, you know, another column or another identifier here. This comes down to business requirements. We talk with you, we ask you what is the information that you're looking for, we ask you what the criteria is to get that information if you were doing it manually, and then we incorporate your business requirement into the criteria of the SQL statement. So that's what this is. It's basically a translation of your SQL statement, of your business requirements into a SQL language that the database can understand. Okay, so I can create multiple ones of these and then have the system use those as part of the process of the view here. So if I go back to new, let me see if it shows up there. And haven't tested that, but that's the way it would work. And the name of the view is DBO cash account. DBO cash account. Let me see if it shows up here. These are numbers. It's alphabetical. So obviously they're not in alphabetical order, so I may have passed it. But that's the logic of it. That's the way it's intended to work. So let's say that I want to, just to keep things simple, let's say that I want to take one of these, let's say periods. So that's a very simple view. It just says what are the periods in my GL setup. So now I've created this SQL query for this view. Actually, maybe I can do one that's a little bit more complicated. Let's see, AR balances. So this is, you know, one of the actual pre-built query views, but AR balances. So now I can manipulate this as I want. These would actually be my custom columns that I have chosen from my business requirements to create the view that we talked about here. So it'd be personalized to me. The rest of the features still are the same. So I can still export to Excel, and then it shows it up here. You know, so very specific to your needs, very customized, and very user-friendly to use. And you can also generate it as an SSRS report. Let me call this Lewis. And again, I'm not typing any parameters per se, but I'm just going to go ahead and do this. It's going through its process. Generate report files. So you can see that it's creating these again. Upload report to server. Let's see, I'm not sure why that crashed, but we can actually just refresh this. And then let's go to the details view. These are all the particular ones that we did. And then if we name them, so it may or may not have set the one that here it is. That's the one I just did. Hey, so I kept the result. And this is a SSRS report, a SQL Services Reporting Service report. What's nice about this is, again, it's got the format. Like I said, you can do it through Excel, or you can go here and basically this is another way to interact with the system. Like I said, if you have a user who just wants to be able to run reports, you give them access to this, and then you can also still export this out to Excel or Word, PDF. It's part of the functionality, like I said, with SQL. So when you install SQL Server and you go to SQL Server 2008 and you see configuration, you see how it says Reporting Services Configuration Manager. That means I want the feature of reporting services to be part of my SQL install. So by default, we don't necessarily install it for you unless you ask us to, but it is easier to just install it all out of the box so that if you do need to use it later, it's already there for you. And you have these other tools here that allow you to use SQL. I don't want to get too bogged down in SQL, but that's basically SQL Server as a package, which is just getting better and better, and now there's SQL 2012. So we go back to here and then we see this report and we can export it out, and let's see if I do Excel. Haven't tried this today, but let's see how it comes out. So it says, hey, I want to save this, and let's put it in my desktop, and open it, and then here it is. Let's go back to here. This is Excel. It looks almost just like the SQL reporting tool. You see how it looks the same? So again, this would all be your custom views, your custom business requirements that have been created for you with the logic that you specified. Of course, the catch is, you want to make sure your logic is right. So we know that with the Microsoft built-in logic, it is correct out of the box. Here, this would mean that however the view is created, there'd be some testing. So, for example, we would develop it for you, and you would validate that the figures and the results that are being brought back match what you expected to see and what's in the system. So pretty cool stuff. Pretty cool stuff. So go ahead, minimize that. That's the view that we were talking about. And here we say close. So with just to review, with the maintenance view, as I call it, or developer view, whichever term you prefer, you have to have rights for the administration module, usually by belonging to the administrators group or by being given specific rights. And then that allows you to see under maintenance, you can see the quick query viewer, which then brings up this screen, which looks a lot like the user view, but it gives you this new button. And then you can still do the same as before and generate an SSRS report, but you've actually created a view that the system can use to bring up the information that you need based on your business requirements. Now the other thing is, if you are creating views, you just choose paste. If I then say save, so I created AP Hist out of their own views. it gives me some options here, right? So I'm creating another base view. So what does that mean? That means that within the system it's going to query the original view, but it also is going to give it basically, it's almost like creating another part of another selection within the module. So this one's called vendor history. I can call it vendor history Lewis. So what is this related to? What is this view that I just told Solomon to use that I created? What is it related to? So I can assign it to whatever module, whatever relationship I want. I'm going to leave it as accounts payable. Do I want it to show up as a menu item? So maybe I do. And it says these are the screens. That's one feature I have not shown you yet that are related to this view. I'll show you that in 1 second. But let's say I want to now give it a screen number. So I'm going to call it, and there is a limit to these numbers. So let's call it I'll just call it 0 QQLB for my name, Louis Brennis. I can also choose what company. Oops, 7 links. So let me just call it LB. Okay. Picky. So it says, which company column should it use. So for company column, I'm just going to keep it as company ID. And the filter is all. So for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to leave it for the most part without changing a lot of it. And I'm going to call this Lewis just to also uniquely identify it. SDK means software developer kit, so you don't really need to worry about it. And then the parameters, like I said, so you say OK. So what did that do? What that did is it did a couple of things. And you go to administration and you go to screen maintenance. And we go down here. This is all the screens that are within Solomon. So every screen in Solomon has a number, right? So this screen that I'm looking at here is called 98330 company. So the view that we created started off with QQ332, I thought. QQ030 QQ030 and then LB. So that's the one that I just created. And if I hit 4, we can see some of the other details behind it. Do I want it to show up as a menu item? Yes. So within Solomon, you may recall, you have the ability to create custom menus, right? And so if you have, let's say, a brand new hire, or if you want to create navigation and simplify navigation so users don't have to traverse through all of this to find what it is that you've created for them, you can create a custom menu for them. So to create a custom menu, you need basically a menu maintenance, and you also need rights, assignments, and groups. So let's say that I want to do that. I have created this quick query. So first thing I do is I'm gonna create a group. This is not necessarily new for a quick query. This is just how Solomon works in terms of customizations for the menus. I'm going to call this, actually let me call this quick query Lewis. And I'm going to say sysadmin. I'm going to save it. So what have I done here? I've just basically created another group called quick query Lewis. Nothing really fancy about it. It just is an additional group. And it's just taking a little bit to write to the database and create the group. So it's a 3-stepper. It's create the group, assign the rights for that screen, and then have the menu show up on their navigation. So while that's doing that, I'm going to go to access rights. And I'm going to say group. And I'm going to say QQ for the group I just created, all companies. And what do I want this group to see? I want it to see QQ030LB. So I'm going to go to here and I type QQ03 tab. Oops. Here's QQ030LB. Type. And you saw, by the way, on here, type V means it's a view. So it's going to be a view. And so now we're in the process of assigning rights in terms of edit, update, delete, insert, all that good stuff. So I'm going to say save this guy. So I've created a group, I've given the group rights, and I've specified it for the specific screen or the specific view that I've created. So now what's the last step? And you saw how now this came back, so now we're all good. And by the way, you see I'm in this is a little side note, but I'm in this box here and it says detail, and voila, grid to Excel. So anytime you're in a box in Solomon 2011 that says the words detail on it, you're going to have this Excel integration built in as long as it's installed in your system. So now what's next is, after creating the group and assigning them rights, is I need to actually create the menu for them. Again, this may or may not be familiar to you. This is just this feature's been around at least since SL7 here. So I do menu for what group? Well, I'm looking for the QQ Lewis group. So now on this menu, nothing's shown, but I do want it to show something, right? So I'm going to call this module group. This is a module view or group. Call it again. And then I'm going to create that. And I'm just going to, I guess I'll call this menu. And these are all the screens that I get assigned to this group. Actually, for here, I'm also going to call it, and you'll see why in a little bit. So far, I got all of these guys. I don't need a hyperlink, so I'm just going to do save. So far, I got all these things, but I got no screen yet. So how do I find this guy in here? Well, we know he has rights to it. If I wanted to check the rights, I can click on related screens and I can actually go to here. This is another way to jump around the system without having you to close this and go back to the other screen and all this. Microsoft has made it easier for you. So you go to here, show menus for, and you see QQ Lewis. So I've already given QQ Lewis the rights to that screen, right? So here is that. That's what this looks like. This, in terms of what screens, this is a menu. This is a menu. In terms of what screens QQ Lewis group has rights to, it only has access to this one screen, and that's what we want. So we want to grab this guy, drop him over here, and then it fills it in for you in terms of the command. You know, so tailored, really specifically, tightly integrated and tailored with your security model. So now I hit save. So if you said, well, what would that look like? Because is it showing up here now? Is it magically just showing up? Is there a custom Lewis group menu here? And it hasn't shown up yet. So there's two things. We got to refresh it like we talked about before, but we can actually get a sneak peek. We can actually go to this little funny looking symbol here, preview menu. And then we say, well, for whom? So sysadmin for this company, right? And we said all companies. So give it a sec. And this tells me this is what Lewis, as a sysadmin, is going to see when he goes to this screen. So when I called it Lewis's QQ module group twice, it's once because one's on the left. Instead of calling it menu, I called it the same. One's on the left, one's on the right. Here are the screens. Here's my AP transaction. It's not interactive here. I can't actually generate it. But what I do is I say, looks good to me. So I actually go back to here if I want. And if I had multiple screens here, this up, down, that basically allows you to put them in whatever order you want. If you did not like this screen, let's say you had multiple screens and you had added too many here and you didn't want them to have it for whatever reason, you can also delete it. You can also delete the screens folder in the group and all that. But for now, we're good. So let's hit close, and we're going to close this. So now we got to tell it, hey, refresh all of this. So I'm going to hit right click. And in this case, I'm just going to exit because the switch user is not available. So it probably wants to, let me see if that was the cause. Oh, so, yep. So before I did that, I had to close the quick query viewer screen. So I'm going to do switch user. I'm going to say OK. And I have to see something that says generating. I'm seeing loading. Maybe that should be good enough. But if not, I'll have to close Solomon. It's a little bit of a quirk with 2011. And then here it is. I did a sneak peek preview. I come here, here, here. So if I'm a new hire and I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing and I want to just learn quickly, you can help them by providing them custom menus just for them. So here I just click on this. I already have access rights to this. And then it brings up the quick query view. And there's probably a lot of transactions, so we'll let that finish. Give it a second because it may be thousands of records. So what this is, as this is loading, it brought back 1,326 records. So the speed will vary depending on, of course, the server load, the processor, how much RAM. I'm running this as an image on my machine, so my computer is acting like the server here. So what this is allowing you to do is basically to generate reports with this generate SSRS reports. It's allowing you to integrate with Excel. It's allowing you to query the data that you want or to write your query yourself to view it how you want. And then you can also give it specific rights for specific users to use and have them be able to see the things that they should see and not see the things that they should not see. So if you were to say, well, how if let's say I'm the boss, I'm the guy who needs to see, or girl who needs to see everything. So how do I quickly just give myself rights for all this stuff? The easiest way to do that is under administration. Go to group maintenance. Now best practice is not to go to user maintenance and start giving yourself a bunch of rights. Not user maintenance, but access rights. It's individually based user rights are not recommended only because they become a nightmare to maintain. Best approach is always do it by group. It's also the way Active Services, Active Directory services work with a cell. You know, you're a domain user. They put you in a group, let's say the accounting group, and now you have rights within the accounting group. It's much harder to trace who has rights to what individually, especially if you have a large organization. So let me go here. I may have created this already, but I didn't. Okay. So let's say I'm going to create this new one. I just implemented your system. You just got upgraded. You want me to give you complete rights to all the query viewer stuff. So let's say quick query. And I'm just using this. You can call this whatever you want. I'm just calling this for clarification. I'm sysadmin, but just for illustration I'm using myself. So I created a group just like we did before, group maintenance. Hopefully it won't take as long and won't say not responding. So we let that do its thing. Let me close this guy out. Hey, it came back quickly. We created a group, and just for illustration I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to go to Access Rights Maintenance. I'm going to find that group again. All companies. And if you've ever assigned rights before, you notice that the screen is evolving. So now there's a web service, which you don't really have to worry about. There is a role center, which is a different feature. But on the screen report query, it's saying basically what it says, load whatever screen, and like we did before with the My AP transaction screen, I would say preload, and down at the bottom, quick query. You can preload anything that is a module. So general ledger is a module, payroll is a module, accounts payable is a module. So what this means is I don't want to go through every single possible screen that has a QQ in front of it and try to assign them rights. I just want it to tell me and loaded them all up here. So these are all the queries that are reflected in the actual module. Alright, so when I look at this, all of these screens have a name on them for all of these. So that's what these all are under here. Accounts, sub-accounts, and so forth. And again, I have the right to delete, I have the right to whatever, so there's a lot of them. You can see how many there are. So if you're the person that needs to have access to everything, especially with delete, I can say Control C, page down, Control V. And if you have delete, you can basically do updates and inserts. So I just say save. It's updated all of these. And I've given that access. So if I'm, let's say, going to add myself because I'm already a user, I can also add a quick query here. So, but that's how you would assign users to that, and then when they log in, they would see this module, and they would see all of these here. All right, so let's close this. And for me to see it as Lewis, I need to log in to the system as Lewis. So let me see if I can get that in. And then this would be so first I'm sysadmin, now I'm Lewis, and this is a Windows authenticated database. So it's trying to get to Solomon that way. So it knows that I'm Lewis because it's taken the Windows directory name. It's regenerating, you can see at the bottom there. And so, quick query, and now I have all the queries. Okay. So that's basically how the access rights work and how you can assign folks the access rights for the screens. So we've basically gone through the user side of it, the maintenance side, and then also the customization side for the menus in terms of how to give folks access and rights. Let's see, one other thing. Let me see if it's working. I haven't tried it yet. Yeah, so let me put that down there. That's another worry about that later. So I can't show you Business Analyzer because it's still doing its thing. Uh, does that make sense for everybody? I know you can't speak, but does anybody have any particular questions so far? I mean, that's pretty much the gist of the actual module. Okay. Um, so no questions so far. Uh, in terms of the quick query, in terms of from a practical perspective, I think that if I were to point out what's most important is the security model. You don't want folks giving them access to be able to query, for example, employee sensitive information or anything like that. So you want to make sure that when you go through the access rights that you give them only access to what they need. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, that's actually all the material that I had to present today. So I appreciate you joining us today. Let me see, there may be another question coming in. Okay, that's all the material that I had to present. Yes, continuing professional education. You can receive continuing professional education credits. I actually would defer you to Shireen for more information on that. You can actually email Jeannie Mahoney at Brittenford to request that information, and we can send that to you in a follow-up email as well. Okay. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you again for joining us. A pleasure to have you. Hope you found this information useful, and hope you have a great rest of your day. All right, bye-bye.